and I'm about to show you how you don't have to just chain piece quilt blocks. You can actually chain piece entire rows so that none of your blocks get mixed up and your rows always stay in order, and you don't have to snip each thread, iron, thread, iron. You can just sew continuously and get that quilt together super fast. So I'm going to take this first block in the top corner, I'm going to sew it to its neighboring block. Then, without snipping the thread, I'm going to take this second block, sew it to its neighbor, and continue without snipping the threads to sew this block to its neighbor and on down the line. So I'm working from left to right. After I have each of these rows sewn together two at a time, I then snip my one thread. I come back and I start at the top. I sew that second one to its third, and then this row to its third, and I continue on down without snipping the threads. It sounds complicated, but it's really super easy. Let me show you. Okay, so I just sewed my top left and its neighbor together. And in many cases, you would snip the seam and you would iron and you would continue on with that top row. But I want to sew all of my rows to each other at the same time. So now I have my top two blocks in row 2 that I'm going to now sew my 1/4 inch together. And again, I'm not going to snip that thread. I'm going to keep sewing row 3 and then row 4 until all of my rows are sewn with those first 2 blocks. So I now have the first 2 blocks of every single row chain pieced together. So what's my next move? I'm going to grab that 3rd block in each row and I'm going to sew it to each of its neighboring blocks. This will keep all of your rows in order. You will end up with an entire quilt top with all of the rows connected, so that even if you're in a small space and you don't have a great design wall like this, it doesn't matter because your quilt top will stay in order as you're speed sewing it through. Okay, so I have another tip for you that's going to make this go even faster, if you can believe it. I'm going to take all of this row in a stack to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew it probably in about 60 seconds, and then I'm just going to leave all of the pieces at my sewing machine, go back up to the top, and then pick the next row. Let me show you. It's kind of a big one, so I'm going to grab my chair, and in order, make sure you keep them in the proper rotation. I just grab them, and I stack them. So the top row is on top, and the bottom row is at the bottom of my pile. I'm going to take this over to my sewing machine. I'm just going to zip on down the line. And then I'm going to do it, and I'll probably have all of these rows sewn together in about 15 minutes. It's pretty cool. And just like that, my entire quilt top is now chain pieced together, each row. So it won't get out of order, and it is mobile. I can transfer it wherever I want if I want to take it on a retreat and sew the rows together there. What I would do is snip each row individually, iron all of the seams going one direction, snip the next row, iron those seams going the other direction, and then I would just sew my rows together 2 by 2 and put my quilt top together top to bottom so that you don't get any rows out of order.